Hey everyone, welcome back to Johnny Can't Sleep. This is a podcast where we talk about random things you may think about at night because you can't fall asleep, and you may wonder what other people may think about these same topics, and it can be very random stuff. So that can make it a lot of fun to discuss a lot of random topics. I am your host, Dustin, and I have one of my really good friends, Cameron, with us, and I've been friends with Cameron for decades since way back into college. Today we are going to talk about time. Is time real, or is time just a construct made up by man? Does the idea of time equal stress? Does the clock equal stress? And we'll kind of get into some of those type of topics and the stressed country that we live in and other countries that aren't quite as stressed out as Americans. We'll just see whatever direction the topic goes. That's what we'll be looking at. And one of the things that brought this topic up in my mind was I saw this meme the other day. I've seen this meme multiple times, but it's pretty funny. It mentions the guy that invented the clock, and he says to a friend, "There will be 12 numbers on it." And the friend says, "Oh, so the day will be divided into 12 segments?" And the inventor says, "No, 24 segments." The friend says, "So the day will start at 1?" And the inventor says, "No, the day will start at 12, which is at night." And then he tells the friend, "And the 6 means 30." So it kind of brought this whole idea into my mind about, obviously, clocks were invented at a certain point, and we didn't abide by the clock up to a certain point in time. People just went about their day and did what they needed to do. And now it seems like we are constantly fighting against the clock, trying not to be late and working extra hard, and looking over some things. I also found something about the time zones that we have in the US. It had mentioned on November 18th of 1883 was called the Day of Two Noons, where the railroad synced all of their clocks at on that day and created the time zones that we have today, because towns before that were maybe 200 miles apart might have varied in time by 30 minutes. And you had all these different time zones and all this stuff going on, and it was hard to keep track of. So, of course, it's understandable why the clock was created and why we need to keep time. But it also seems like we're a slave to time, and the commute in some cities are pretty brutal. But not all countries are like this. I don't know what your thoughts are on some of this, Cameron. Where you grew up, halfway around the world, was it a lot more relaxed?
You know, it was not more relaxed, but actually looking around, I think we were talking about that, and we were traveling, both of us, last couple of weeks. I think that busier metropolitan, you feel the stress of time a little more. You need to get somewhere, but you can't get there fast enough because of traffic or whatnot. And a lot of the times, I started to feel that this wasn't an issue back when we were in college. Not that we were lazy, we had a lot going on. Our social calendar definitely was the biggest biggest thing in our calendar at that time. And then college activities, fraternity activities. But I feel like that I think that the automation of the cell phone, and all of a sudden we have all these things that now we're much more accessible from every possible way. If you recall, we would go to class, or we were doing something, a rush activity or something activity, we were disconnected from everyone else besides who were there with us. No one can send us emails 24/7. No one can reach out to us 24/7 because we didn't have a device on us. So what I'm saying is that I feel like that the more we're accessible electronically to everyone around us, the more things we have to sort of do, even if you want to or not. We feel like we have to do it. Part of it's just, that relationships have gotten so electronic these days that communication is so quick that, oh, it's 6:30, let's go do this now. Oh, then I have a 8:30, and then, oh, I have this. So I think that, again, back then we didn't have no binge watching, TV available either. So what I'm saying is I think that all these things have gotten electronics and automation has made us much more busier, I think, than before. I recall that, I was going to class and I got back and a bunch of those people were playing beach volleyball by our fraternity. Remember, there's a court there. Actually, I saw it not long ago. It's still there, by the way. Uh, I said, sure. I just put my books down and I said, sure. Summer I was wearing shorts, so we just started playing beach volleyball. No, worries that they might be in, you know, voicemail because nobody really stuffs voicemails. What I'm saying is that the things to do were a lot fewer back then, and I'm talking just back in college than today. For example, this morning I had to do some car stuff, and then I had to go some other stuff in bank, and then I had to still some other stuff, and then I had to go meet a client somewhere. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at a clock, and it's 4 p.m. and I only slept 4 hours last night. And then I had to prepare dinner, and today's my day off, so it's my job to make dinner today. So, and the next thing you know, it's 6:30, and then friends of mine wanted to hang out, so sure, let's go do that. And now it's 10 p.m. Eastern, and I've been at it since 6 with 4 hours of sleep. So I'm just saying, all this is brought upon on me today, for example, because of my accessibility, and that's probably what it is. If you I was in Portugal a few years ago, and we were in a small village, and the village was expert at making these tiles, decorative tiles, blue tiles. They would make one and then they're decorated, then it takes a while. And we stopped at the village for about a half a day. We means our group, and we had some coffee and some donuts, and it seemed like they had nowhere to go. It was just a slow environment. When I go to Lincoln, Nebraska, it is very, very different to where I live now, a big metropolitan.
Sure.
So I think it's that I would say, yes, the time was, it is, we have less constraints on us, fewer things to do back then. Not fewer things to do, but we were less accessible by our social and even, and employers didn't email you or call you. I mean, we were still in college, so it's part-time work. But I don't recall us being available for everyone 24/7. We did
Yeah.
sort of what we wanted. So I think that,
Well,
in my opinion, it's just become like that. Now, if you travel the world where the phones
yeah.
are not, now that's not true anymore. In 2025, I would say phones are available everywhere. People are glued to their phones, whether they're burning up time for stories and TikTok and internet stuff, or they're actually connecting with their friends and texting. All of a sudden, you're involved with all these conversations that you didn't have before electronically. You're carrying on communication with many, many people at one time. It takes a lot from you. I mean, when I went last year to Arctic Ocean and Alaska trip, there's days I didn't have any coverage, and honestly, it was fine. Like last trip in Utah, I only had coverage when I got back to a hotel or my cabin. I had no coverage,
Yeah.
so it was kind of nice to not have any coverage. So your phone is not buzzing up, whether with friends or clients or whatnot. So I think I'd say my opinion would be here is that the advancement in technology and us being accessible to everyone around us. Sometimes your
Was it
friends will text.
nice being cut off from the world for a while? Have a day
Yes,
like where it's just
yes,
me and
yes.
nature. No signal, no service.
No, no, no. And the thing is that I think that we're gonna have to go towards something like putting your phone in a box 3 or 4 hours at a time. It's hard, but I would like to start thinking towards that because we're losing touch with what's real and what's not real. I don't know. I don't want to sound too. Love to hear from the audience, who's our small enough audience for now. Anyone who wants to make comments on this and tell us what their thoughts are. I feel, and these are just our comments. We're not expert at any of this stuff. We're just two friends who want to talk about stuff. And so I would say, honestly, it'd be great to get some feedback from others. And we can always come back to this topic again. It's a very tough topic because I
Sure.
see my friends and their kids are in travel ball and this and that, the other, and parents have zero time. They're running from morning to night, in summers doing this and that, and all stars and baseball and little league, and it's a tough. And then lose touch with their friends who have the same kids and the same team. So that has happened to my good friend, which is fine. He's enjoying it, and he's that's part of being a dad and growing up, raising kids and all that. That's great. But I feel like that we've gotten so busy with all these things, which are based on, I think, technology, emails, phones,
Yeah.
whatever that has gotten very tough for us to.
Well, making your point, I think so. I saw a study and it said the US is the number two stressed out country in the world, only behind South Korea. And when you mention technology and being connected and everything, South Korea is a super connected country. So it does kind of make sense. Lots of people, small country has a lot of connectivity there. But the same thing, I think, in the US, the cities that were ranked the highest were LA and New York City and Chicago, which are chaotic cities. Traffic is pretty bad. People do feel a bit like they're a slave to the clock or their commute or whatever the case happens to be. But then you think about like here where I'm at in Arizona, when you cross the border to the south, you do get way more relaxed time in a lot of places in Mexico. Sometimes it seems like that would be nice too. If you're working for a while, you go in the morning at 8 o'clock, and then by the time it's 11:30, it's time to close up shop and go home, have some lunch, have a little siesta, and you come back at 1:30 or whatever the case happens to be. You get a little bit of relaxing in the middle, kind of slow your day down a little bit. There's some countries it seems like they've kind of figured out how to keep things a little bit more slower pace, a little more relaxing. And I know sometimes Americans have a hard time when they visit some countries like that because we're used to things being open super long and talking to people that have been building houses in other countries, how much longer it can take to get things done construction wise and things like that. But it seems like a lot of other countries have kind of figured out how to leave some of the stress behind. And speaking of that, I ran into something. Well, let me get your input on this or your thoughts. So, would you say
Before
that
we go that further, I want to give you a stat, since I'm an
okay,
actuary, sort of.
okay, cool.
We have 340 million people in U.S. as 2024. We had 386 cell phone lines. 386 million. So whatever, 1.02, whatever the percentage. More than one cell phone line. I have two. I actually have three lines. Two cell phones and a Google line, and then a home phone. So I have four lines. Plus my wife's phone. That's five lines. I don't know why we need all five, but we have them. I need two for business. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying we're like connect every single possible way we got to be connecting with people, and that's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What I ran across, well, and I wanted your opinion, just a quick opinion first, and then we'll get into some details on it. Do you think Americans work harder or longer than medieval peasants, or do you think medieval peasants worked more?
No, I am not an avid history reader, but I can give you an example. For example, let's just take a step back. And I was in Italy last time, but it was 2010. And I believe they just discontinued their siesta, like just means recently. And I was speaking to the hotel manager, and he was extremely upset that he could not go home and take a nap. And I asked him how that work. He goes, our life balance is much more important than work. Work is something we do to sort of feed ourselves, but it's not the end all be all for us.
Yeah,
So what do you mean by that? So, well, we just sort of get to work depending on the shift we have, 9 or 10 a.m., stop and get coffee, see friends, and get to work, and then to whatever. These times are not exact, but sort of whatever, ballpark. And then half day at 2:30, 3 o'clock, they would have a siesta. Now, someone can correct me on this, the timing, but siesta, you're off for a few hours, and then you go back to work kind of thing.
yeah,
Not sure how applicable that is in a hotel chain situation with a Marriott hotel or something like that in
yeah,
Rome. But that's what the standard was. And then you go home, you take a nap, and then you come back to work, and then you're again up late dinner. One thing in Italy was for example, let's just say we're going to go to dinner somewhere in the U.S. out at a restaurant. We're not going to sit there for 1 or 2 hours and discuss, life. We're going to eat and leave. I'm very quick at eating, and I mean, I'm way too fast for a lot of things. But
Yeah.
there, we sat down for dinner one time, wife and I, versus a quick grab and go. It was like hours. I said, well, I want to leave. Well, what do you mean you want to leave? I don't want to be here, sitting here outside in Rome and in some, it was outside table somewhere in Rome. I forgot where it was, but uh, busy street. And I said, I don't want to sit here. And now what do I do? They take the time to converse, and social aspects are very important. Again, I'm talking 2010s. That's 15 years ago now. But I presume that is still probably a true case. It's a cultural thing too as well. Here, now I have some friends who are like that. A good friend of mine in Indianapolis, when I hang out with him, like for example, I'll go see him. We're gonna just hang out. Like there is no going to someplace, making a meal and then chit chatting and just maybe going to the beach. Usually, the last time we hung out at the beach, Panama City Beach. So I'm saying that there are people here in the U.S. who are practicing that very successfully, or professionals.
Yeah.
But there are people like me who are stacking. Like for example, my July is already over, and then July just started. Like
Yeah.
they have stuff going on back to back to back all day Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday I have some soft time, and then Monday through Friday next week I have like literally at least 15 appointments. So that's very, very busy. And then August 1st will come up, and I think it will be busy, extremely busy August. So a lot of this is our own doing. I would
Yeah.
say, a lot of this is our own doing. If we want to slow down, we could. But then I was telling you earlier that I had some downtime in June and July. I was extremely bored. Like, oh, what do I do next? So you get used to this whole schedule that you kept, and maybe 20% of things you're doing are meaningless, but you're busybody. So I would say I'd love to hear from some audience folks that, our viewers, that, maybe you're not as busybody like we are talking about, like myself or the
Yeah.
host. Uh,
Well,
and
found
how do
some
you,
I found some details about medieval peasants. It was really interesting. They worked on average about 150 days a year. So I'm sure there were months where they worked more than other months, depending on if they're tending crops and you have other things that are going on or more critical or more important. But
yeah,
150 days a year. And so I thought, well, how does that compare to the average person working in the US workforce? When you do the math, of course, there's 52 weeks in a year, 5 days of work per week. So you have 260 days. And if you've got the average American gets probably somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks of vacation per year, and you have some holidays sprinkled in there. But when you really came down to it, it looked like the average American is probably working 230 to 245 days per year. So that's about probably 80 to 90 days more a year working than a medieval peasant. It's kind of crazy when you think about it because you think back to those times being harder times and you feel like people probably practically work themselves to death. But then again, the lords of these areas probably wanted to also make sure that people were happy and they had enough religious festivals and various other things too to break the work apart and keep people happy and that kind of stuff. But it's kind of crazy when you look at it and you think, oh, the average American works about a half a year longer within a calendar year versus a medieval peasant. Now, that's nothing to be said about what kind of work was being done and what kind of work Americans do. There's plenty of
20
people that,
hours back then. I know, we're
yeah,
calling annual
and
workday.
well, and some of that I think came from English land. So a lot of the year the days are shorter, and then some of the summer, of course, the days are a little bit longer. So Yeah, it's hard to say because you didn't keep track of things via a clock. It wasn't like you were punching a clock and they're coming into to work at 8 a.m. and leaving at 5 or whatever. They probably had different chores and things that they had to get done, and if those things got done sooner or later or whatever the case happened to be, then that might have completed their work for the day. And it's probably like farm work nowadays, like US farmers, a lot of the summertime they have longer days and a lot of times in the winter they probably have shorter days. Well, the days are shorter anyhow, but that's different too for farmers that own the land or they're working the land, and the harder they work, the longer they work, the more they can produce, whereas medieval peasants were working for somebody else. But it's kind of an interesting thought, anyhow, is something that I ran across, and I would have assumed that medieval peasants worked more days than the average person nowadays. But it also brought me to the point of the fact that the average American gets 2 or 3 weeks of vacation and some sprinkled in holidays, maybe end up with the equivalent of around 4 weeks or so of vacation. And in comparison to what the laws are in the European Union, I saw that it mentioned, one of the things that I found said that the minimum requirement by jobs or workplaces in the European Union is they have to give their employees at least 4 weeks of paid vacation. But it mentioned that the vast majority of employers give the European workers 6 or 7 weeks of vacation, so it averages more in the 6 to 7 week range. And then, of course, some additional holidays, I'm sure, Christmas and other holidays and stuff like that. So, it also is one of those things, especially when you travel, and I know you've traveled extensively, and even when you travel certain places in the States, I think it makes sense why you see so many European travelers because they get a lot more vacation, so they can easily plan a 2 week trip to the States and not be using nearly all of their vacation, like
No.
can happen to a lot of Americans. I know when we've been in the Grand Canyon or down in the little village down in the Grand Canyon, there would be a lot of Europeans down there, and it never really hit me that hard until you start realizing how much more vacation they get. And why, when you go down to Havasupai and you go down there, and all that stuff is done by reservation online well in advance. Same thing with the wave. When you're going to the wave, and that's done by permits a few months in advance, that a lot of Europeans can swallow up those permits and do things online. And if they get selected for the lottery for certain things like that, they can easily come and not be using all of their vacation. So anyhow, kind of a interesting thought too, that the European Union mandates significantly more vacation for their employees, for people that
Well,
work for
here's the thing.
companies.
Here's the kicker. France is 30 days per year. PTO. France is.
Yeah,
Um, well, France average salary is much lower than the United States, and it's in like 39,000 euros. So you are, I mean, getting what you are working, honestly. Productivity wise, you're not making as much as US, and your taxes are higher. Your net is something like, 30,000, 27, 28,000 a year average in France. I'm not looking at bigger cities. It's the whole, an average in US would be, hang on, I'll just say city. So I think you are kind of getting, no, US is pretty much right on at France. At 39.9 is the average salary, median income in 2023. So you're right. I mean, we're right on as other countries, like France, whatnot. So you're right. I think um, we are working a little extra, by 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something along those lines. Um,
it
and I
feels
think
like that
we're
probably leads to a lot of our stress too. Americans are a lot more stressed out. They don't have as many days off and don't travel quite as much, and your vacation days become very prized.
Oh
And
yeah, 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 yeah. I know people in my family that they wouldn't want to burn even a half a day because of my immediate family. It's like, okay, well,
yeah,
okay, leave. Oh, half a day is important. If I do this, and I can only, half a day work more, then it counts as a full day because it's a half day today. So it's like all those psychological things. And I think and if you work for yourself, you have a different drive. Yes, you can take a couple, 3 weeks off on your own, on the slow time, which I can. Um, uh, but at the same time, when I work, I end up working, more than likely I'll probably work 90 to 120 days straight without any day off. That's what the schedule is going to be like. August, we're starting 90 days to 120 days with zero days off. There are a lot of deliverables, heavy duty deliverables, which is fine. I like what I do. But that schedule only carries for my profession right now. Um,
yeah,
Maybe 5 months a year, if that, 4 to 5 months a year. I say 4 solid months if I work every day, 12-hour days, that's my year. Um, but that took a lot of effort for me to squeeze it in a way and then be content with what it is. Because again, I know entrepreneurs who work 6.5 days a week because when they look at their billables and what they're making, they can't stop it because when they're not working, they're losing, 4,000 or 5,000 or 7,000 a day and whatever they're
yeah,
make. I'm just saying, giving examples of what they're working on. So that drive of, accomplishing more and cashing in their time for more. So I think a lot of it is personal. A lot of it, this is, what do you want to achieve financially and whatnot. And then some people I know, some very good friends of mine, who are more content with being free than chasing to get more dollars in their accounts. So that's another thing. You know, you're achieving certain things and you're wanting to achieve, you have bills to pay, kids and whatnot,
yeah,
expenses. But at some point, you need to realize what it is that you need, and beyond that, it's just not really has that much value. I saw a study a while ago that it said that uh, if an average American made about 80 grand a year, he or she wouldn't be any more happier if they made 20 or 25 more by working extra. So there was like almost like a return on investment, at 80, 85, whatever the number was. Beyond that, it's just you're just doing it to do it because you already have achieved, your billables, which is going to cover your expenses and your vacation. It took me a long time. It took me 20, more than 2 decades to understand that concept
yeah.
because I was working, 5, 6
Well,
days a week.
one thing I was thinking about too, and I just had a coworker that just died in this last week. She's probably about your age, she's a couple years older than me. And
Mhm.
one of those things that you think about, no one's on their deathbed ever wishing that they had worked more. They always wish that they spent more time with family, they vacationed more, they made more memories and things like that. And a lot of times that's stuff that's also stress relief. Like we were both on vacation in Colorado and Utah, and it's just nice and relaxing, even if it's just for a week to be able to get away from work and be up in the mountains and go various cool places and just leave a little bit of work behind for a little while. It's kind of rejuvenating, especially when you're out in nature. And I know that's how you like to travel. That's how we like to travel too. We don't go do a bunch of big city stuff, and so sometimes the nature and the mountains and the reset and just the smells and the pine forests and all the other things that you get to do, going to the hot springs and hiking around, it can just be kind of a nice recharge or reset. But it's one of those things we don't get to do that too much. That was one of those interesting thoughts when you look at the European Union and how they do allow quite a bit more vacation. But speaking of Europe, so I did find something really cool. There is an island off of the coast of Norway, just above the Arctic Circle, and it's called Samaroy Island, and I think it means summer island. And Samaroy Island, they eliminated the clock. There is no observance of time there. It just doesn't exist. People do as they please with their businesses. They don't worry about what time it is or anything like that. And I believe it's more of a fishing village. So it could also be a situation where the guys, if they're going out fishing, you know how it is going fishing. You go and if you catch a bunch of fish, you probably come back in once you're done, and maybe the fishing lasted 3 or 4 hours where the fish were biting and you were pulling them in, or maybe you have a day you go out and you go out even longer and they're not biting. But it was one of those interesting things that you're looking at, but it also being above the Arctic Circle, I think it said from May 18th to July 26th, the sun doesn't set. So, of course, that may factor into it a bit too. The sun never goes down. Well, it doesn't really matter what time it is, you know.
You
But
know,
your body still gets tired and you still have to go to bed and get some sleep or decide when you're going to close up your shops in the town. That means you have the reverse of that in the winter, where the sun probably doesn't really come up for a month and a half or a couple months. So maybe it's easier in a place like that. But I thought that was a pretty interesting thing, the fact that they just voted the clock out and said time isn't observed here. You can come and visit, and we don't
time
worry
is
about what time
time
it
is
is.
passing. Though. Time is passing. You can't let the time. I mean, you are aging. You know, you have a certain time to eat a meal or two. So time is there. They're just not observing it. That's just very. I think that's
Yeah,
just sort of in spirit what they're saying. You know, great, but but you could do that in a town like that because you know how many folks live there, or what their needs are at the grocery store, or what their needs
yeah,
are at the gas station. You know, it's great, but I think time is
yeah,
how we use it, meaning not use it, but how we let the time affects us mentally. You know, when you and sometimes when you get in a rut of back to back to back to back, you know, meetings or client calls, or for my case, business development, or, you know, whatever, you know, there's a lot of things next week I'm working on, which are a few are revenue generating, but there's a lot of things I need to meet with people and lunches, coffees. I'm already scheduling because I was out for 2 weeks. That's part of doing business for a small business like myself. And then they're friends. You get to meet friends and just, you know, in a casual setting. So that's part of what I do. Uh, Not everything a small business does is revenue generating. A lot of the times, you know, you're doing, you know, X number of days is revenue generating, and Y number of days is delivery or client relationship management. So those are fun times. Those are not stressful. But
yeah,
I'm finding out that next Monday and Tuesday, I have 3 or 4 lunch, coffee, and then 3 or 4 things on Monday and Tuesday each day. And I feel like Wednesday and Thursday and Friday also have very big things, which will take more than half day each. Um, Non-revenue generating, which is fine. But I brought that upon myself to do it. You know, I feel sometimes you feel like that you have to do it, and you justify yourself. Oh, you know what? It's important, and it is important. But do I need to do 4 things on Monday? Probably not. I could do two, but I can't not take them off my calendar now because they're all over there. So I think a lot of this is us doing it to ourselves, and then I also see parents of young kids, and we were, you know, I don't have kids, that their kids really drive their schedules heavy, and for some reason, and again, uh, I don't want to offend any parents listening to this podcast, that I see kids' activities weren't there when we were younger at the level they are today. You know, for example, practices for their games, wherever they're playing sports, you know, 2, 3 times a week. Then they have matches on the weekends. Parents are gone all weekends at a time for different matches. We didn't have that growing up. You know, we uh, organized sports were a thing, but not a thing that which are beyond the school these days. The whole club sports are great. Kids are they teach kids all kinds of great things, um, But I've seen that is, unless your kid can drive, then all of a sudden that is your kid's schedule, not yours. But I'm talking,
Yeah,
a little league type situation when kids are super young and you have to take them and wait there for them to practice, which is great. It's your job to be a parent to as part of raising kids and whatnot. What I'm saying is that there's only so many hours in a day. And I definitely feel like how devoted the parents are today. We played ourselves in the street, whatever sport we're playing. We just did it ourselves, at age, 10, 9, 10. But there were fewer organized sports back then beyond school. Even schools had very few sports, but not everybody made the team. So nowadays, and I do believe that athletics play a huge role in kids' development. It's because I work with a lot of athletes a year, thousands of athletes a year, and I see them as a different mindset as a kid who doesn't play sports. So I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm just saying all those things have caused time to go away. You have time from 7:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. ish, Monday to Friday, and it's over if you have young kids. And how would you have time for yourself? You wouldn't, because you would have the friends group would be the same as the kids' parents, kids' friends, you know what I mean? Their parents, kind of a thing, because you're all doing the same thing together. And I guess I'm rambling at this point. So I think that we've gotten very busy with electronics um, and activities, which are definitely essential, but I think some of them are just a little too much. Again, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm just saying what I observe. Um, Especially summers, and it just keeps going on for young kids. The older kids it's different because they have a drive. They want to achieve a certain sport level, maybe in high school or college, and they want to, But young kids, um, they really can't get anywhere themselves, and parents want to be there. I mean, it's just the way it goes. They want to be there to see the kids. So, um, I feel for those parents, their dedication and devotion, and honestly, they're going to jobs and running to this and that. I see them all the time, and if I were to have kids, I'm sure I'd be doing the same thing. And you do the same thing. We've talked about this, that how busy you've been in the school year. You don't have
yeah.
any time to do any of this stuff. So, but you tell me, because you grew up here in US, did you have that level of activities when you were 10 years old and your parents were running you around all over the place, or less?
To the degree that a lot of kids have now. I remember from maybe fourth to seventh grade playing baseball. So I think 4 summers going into
Yeah.
fourth grade and I think through seventh grade maybe. As kids growing up Gen X, your parents didn't take you anywhere usually. I rode my bike, had to grab my bat and my baseball glove and hop on my bike, make sure I was in my baseball uniform, and you ride your bike over to the park. Now I see a lot of people shuffling their kids around to way more activities. Now I grew up in smaller town Midwest, but there's a lot of activities that go on where we're at now. But yeah, we shuffled our kids around a bit to t-ball and soccer and other stuff for them to determine if they liked it or not. But I remember once I was involved in some activities, it was pretty much up to me to get my butt to practice or get my butt to the games and have a schedule on the wall, and you knew when you needed to be where, and you became a little bit more responsible with it. It wasn't a situation where I had to worry about my mom making sure that she got me to the games or whatever. You had a schedule and you looked at it and you're like, oh, I have practice at 4 o'clock today, or tomorrow is a game at noon. You were on top of your own activities and your own things. But I mean, if you wanted to go somewhere a ways away, you would ask your parents. But I think as kids, we were a lot more responsible doing our chores, being involved in our activities, and making sure that we got there and things like that. But yeah, it's a little bit different now. I think we babied our kids more and shuffled them around to things. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of
About this, I live in a very large metro area. you can't really have all your kids' games around the park where they live, and not every town has a little park. You know what I mean? So I can't. It's not fair for us to say also that parents are driving because there's not really facilities in every little village that every little park, every little town that has a park, baseball park, whatnot. So they got to take kids somewhere larger. And the metro I live in is 4.4 million people. So it's just even though the activities are nearby within 5 6 mile radius, but that's not where kid can go themselves. So I understand that. That's the. But I think I would say if I have to wrap up this topic of time, I think
Yeah.
A, we definitely work more than European folks. We always have. And B, we have gotten ourselves busy a little more than even you and I were in college, um,
Yeah.
based on the technology and the cell phones and the constant text messages and somehow checking all your email addresses at night, multiple times a day, and whatnot. So I think that whole idea of us being connected 24/7 to others to be communicated by or to or from or whatever that is definitely causes you to not disconnect from whatever that email or cell phone business is, whether it's chain text messaging or by the way, on the record, I completely hate chain text messaging. It's so annoying. Uh, but anyways, it's just and also you're burning up a lot of time, and you feel like you have to be involved in text, and it's just and I do it, and a lot of us do it. A lot of our listeners will be saying they do it, but I think at some point we will have to put our phones down if we want to be sane in the near future. I've heard that there are, I've not been to any of these places, but I've heard there are like yoga type retreats where you go and you don't have any electronics. There's no electronics allowed. So if
Okay.
there's an emergency, someone will call a certain number. Otherwise, there is no electronics allowed. Um, I see when I go to conferences, I see people are working while a session's being presented and they are on a cell phone or they're logged into their Wi-Fi and they're actually answering emails. You are far away from home to learn a certain subject matter for either continuing education or learning to be a better subject matter expert, and you're working. I feel like we are over connected. That's where I feel that we
It
need
would, yeah, it would be interesting to hear from people that have maybe lived in the US, lived in Europe, and get their thoughts or their things they've observed being in both places as far as the workforce goes and vacation and the ideas around a lot of that. It would be interesting. And then also if anyone has thoughts or comments about if they would love to live on a little island somewhere where they don't observe time and you don't worry ever about what time it is. You just do the things you want to do when you want to do them. It would be interesting to hear from people to see if people think that that would be a better way of life or what their thoughts are on some of that. I would love to get some great comments going on some of this stuff because there's going to be people that have lived in different European countries and have some great stories or details or things to share about their experiences, and that would be a lot of fun to see some of that discussion get going in the comments. So I know we probably should wrap this up since we've been talking for a while and got off on a couple of tangents, but
yeah, yeah.
no, I guess we'll leave it at that and we'll see what comments people have to say. And we appreciate everybody listening and leave your thoughts in the comments.
Thank